I'm Evan.
You're Evan? And that's Garrett. So, last week I told you we were going to go through 8 knives for this tournament. They consist of the Camillus, Les Stroud Arctic, the Helly Harding, Rimke, Backcountry Knife, the Morakniv Bushcraft, the Diving Sparrow Knife Works Woodsman, an SE3, a Hablas trade knife, and the CRKT knife.
That's mine.
Today we have the 2 that we randomly picked or randomly drew out of a bag are the Hablas trade knife and the Morakniv Bushcraft knife. Test these knives in the exact same scenarios so that you can get an understanding of generically what they can and should do in the field. We're going to be doing chopping and batoning, then we're going into cutting, then we're going into spine scraping and ferro rod usage, then we will do a fit and finish, and then finally the last one will be which one Evan likes better.
Me.
Let's get to it, chopping and batoning. So we're going to start with the Hablas trade knife. The trade knife came out of the box, and this, granted, was about 8 years ago that I got this knife. When I got it out of the box, it was I think a Scandi or a convex edge, or somewhere in between. Didn't really know what it was. So I've reprofiled it now, actually today, to give it a much better convex grind, and it's actually cutting pretty well, where the sharpness is pretty good. So as you can see, the batoning portion pretty effective. The grind is much more improved now, and one of the reasons I did go with the convex grind on it is the convex, to me, is probably the easiest one to kind of reprofile with. As you can see, with the chopping and batoning, the edge is held up really well. I don't have any glinting or bumps or foldovers. It's definitely holding the edge pretty good.
Okay, hold on. We're at about 13
yeah, I don't care anymore. So chopping batoning, I'm going to go from a 0 to 10. I'm going to split the points between both the chopping and batoning. Batoning is a 5 out of 5. Did a great job. Chopping, the handle's a little smooth. It's got a hot spot, and because of that hot spot, you have to kind of choke back on it. And I'm not a huge fan of the shape of it in general. It's like that sock that you have that just feels icky when you put it on. This is not icky, but it's that same kind of feeling where it just doesn't feel like it's supposed to. So we'll give that a 2 out of the 5 for the chopping, giving us a 7 of 10. The next thing we're going to do is cutting. We'd like to do a few different examples of cutting. How do you feather stick, cutting rope, and then we have Gorilla Tape, and I've wrapped it about, I guess, 40 times. Well, 21 times, so it's two-sided, so it's 42 layers. And then I have this bank line. So on the cutting of the Gorilla Tape, it's got a little hesitancy. It's almost like there's, maybe it did dull a little bit on the chopping and batoning. Okay. For cutting through the Gorilla Tape, cutting through this, making feather sticks, cutting through wood in general. We're going to give it a, because of the difficulty on the Gorilla Tape and a little hesitancy and a little bit more of the difficulty on the 550 cord, I'm going to knock it down a little bit, but it does pick itself up with the feather sticking. It definitely lends itself towards the Bushcraft style knife. We're going to give it a 6 out of 10. Next is spine scraping and ferro rod usage. Gonna be honest with you, that was kind of, yeah, that's underwhelming. So, spine scraping and ferro rod usage, 4 out of 10. The final category before Evan takes over is the fit and finish. I already told you I don't like the handle. I'm not a huge fan of getting that the bow drill divot in the handhold for a bow drill in the actual handle. I mean, I can theoretically see the usefulness of it. The thought behind it is a utilitarian style knife, kind of a be-all knife. I'm just not a fan of it. So the knife overall in this fit and finish category is 9 inches overall, a 5-inch blade or cutting edge. The steel is 1095 high carbon, and it's got these micarta scales. Obviously it's a full tang. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's $149. I'm not a big fan of the handle. I straight up will tell you that. I don't like the way the micarta is shaped. I don't like the way the handle is shaped. I don't have particularly big hands. I've got medium size hands, and this is too small for me. And it's a man's knife. So it's you know, originally I'd gotten it for my son, and my eldest son, who's now 19, and it fit fine for him, but it's one of those knives that, you know, it's kind of like that high school girlfriend you know, it just doesn't feel right, so you move on. That's kind of the way I feel about the handle. The steel is pretty good steel. I mean, obviously it's 1095. It's got a good heat treat on it. It's tough. It's kept an edge. I have got a little bit of I don't think you could see it, but there is tiny, 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 tiny chipping in it. And that is where we were batoning at and where it was catching on some stuff. What do you think? Fit and finish? We're gonna give it a 4 out of 10. On the Evans scale of 0 to 10, how do you like this knife?
4.
Got a 4. So it is a average knife, and if you're wondering how that compares to other knives, it's it's right down the line. It quite literally it is average. Whoa. So you see that knot? It is a super smooth cut right through that. And that didn't mess the edge up at all. There is absolutely no damage. The edge is just as sharp as it was before, whereas with the Habilis, on one side you can't feel it, but on the other side, if you run your finger there, you can feel where it's kind of taken a chip and folded it out. But it's so small you can't see it. We're going to give it a 3 out of the 5 points. Obviously, it's just a little bit small, and we'll go over that in the fit and finish here in a little bit. And it doesn't have any weight to it, so it's just not going to get a lot of power behind it. But it is so sharp, and it's got such a nice grind on it. This is the Scandi Grind. It just does the job well. You do have to choke way back on it, but the handle is really, really well situated for that kind of thing. It feels good. So the chopping is a 3 out of 5. The batoning, man, I am as pleased as you can be. It is controllable. I was able, when doing the wedge cuts, to literally U it and V it really, really easily. Much more easily than I'd say 60% of the knives out there. This has been a real pleasant surprise on that portion of it. So it is going to get a 5 out of 5 on its batoning portion. So the chopping and batoning, you get an 8 out of 10 total. We're going to do a little bit of wood cutting. Okay. One of the things I like about it is that it's controllable enough to do fine, detailed cuts on the wood. So if you're making traps, and I'm going to show you a trap cut here in a second, it's very, very simple to do that. It is nimble enough on very thin wood to cut the notch out for a trap without doing any damage to it. So it's agile, sharp, and cuts really, really well. Last thing we have, as you saw before, is the bank line. And slices through that. So for cutting, man, it just did a really good job.
Okay? Will you do me? Oh, it's mine. It's mine. It's mine. It's mine. Hey, get on it. Get on it. Hey, get on it. What's that?
Okay. So, quite simply put, the feather sticking is as close to perfect as you could ask for this knife. And on both methods, by hand or by sticking it into wood. Okay, as you can see with my lovely assistant showing you there, is that it has scraped the fur really, really well. That little furry substance will be good for when we use on the ferro rod here in a second.
No, man. Fire! Fire! Daddy, fire! Coming out your life.
As you can see, ferro rod usage, top notch. We lit a fire on our feather stick with just the spark from the ferro rod. Spine scraping and ferro rod usage, 10 out of 10. Now, we got to get Evan's take on it.
Hello.
On a 0 to 10 scale, how much do you like this knife?
About 8.
8 out of 10. Now we're going to go over the fit and finish. So for the fit and finish, we have the 9.1 inch long overall length, a 4.3 inch blade. The steel is stainless steel. I think it's a Sandvik is what it's called. The rubber or the handle is a what they call a high friction rubber. It's actually very, very grippy. It's just a really well made knife. Overall cost is $39, $40, depending on which version you get, which handle you get. It's incredibly affordable. It's, man, if you need a knife, you don't want to spend money on it. I've processed a lot of game with it. I've used a companion. I've used, I don't know, 10 different Mora knives. This is one of my favorite Mora knives.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give it a 8 out of 10 on fit and fit. So by score, 25 out of 50, 43 out of 50. It's not even close. I mean,
Destroy it.
I'm not gonna destroy it. It's 140 bucks. But especially if you take into account the pricing, $100 difference from this knife to this knife. If you're using these two knives as a starting point, or you're going to choose between these two knives as a starting point, it's no contest. It's just nothing. It feels better in the hand. It's grippier. It doesn't slip. It's more ergonomic. It cuts better. It chops better. It batons better. And the edge held up better. So for next week, we are going to be doing, as a sneak peek, the SE3 versus the Cricket.
Wait.
Yes, I know it's CRKT, but who doesn't hear Cricket when you read that thing? It says Cricket. All right, guys, we appreciate you. We'll see you next week. What are you supposed to do now?
Subscribe with notifications and like the video.
And then
Subscribe to my channel.
share it.
Share.
He also has a channel where he plays video games.
Yeah, it's fun.
We're gonna have to rethink that.